so we've been, in our School of Theology, we started with recently in the book of Genesis, and we said, well, let's go into Exodus, and then we did a short study of Leviticus, and now we're in Numbers, and so we're doing a Pentateuch type thing, and it's a good study. It's really enlightening to see how God dealt with the children of Israel and how they responded to God. It's really amazing to see how quickly, how fickle they were sometimes when God had done so much. To whom much is given, much is required. And it's something that we need to consider as Christians because we've been given a lot. Many of you are holding a Bible in your hands, and that is one of God's absolute greatest gifts to mankind. And that the wealth of wisdom and knowledge and guidance is found there. It's without limit. And we just don't take advantage of it as we should. I know we don't. And but we have it. We have an opportunity, and we live in a world today that is changing very, very quickly. And I was thinking about Moses and the children of Israel. They were headed for a place that God had promised to Abraham. It was called the land of Canaan. And the people who dwelt there were called Canaanites. And so there were many different nations that made up the Canaanites. And God had talked to Abraham, who he brought to that land, and he said that he picked on one particular nation, and he says, it's going to be over 400 years before your descendants come back to this land that I promised to you. Because, he said, the sin of the Amorites is not yet full. Now, it's hard to, it's not like in Moses or Abraham's day, they had newspapers, they had television, they had video, they didn't have the internet. Can you believe that? And so we have clay tablets and stuff that archaeologists have dug up in the dirt, and we have things in the Bible that have been recorded. And the Bible tells us that the land of Canaan was a people that were sold out to idolatry, immorality, debauchery. It was their way of life. And some people have really struggled with this. I don't think about it too much, so I don't struggle with it. But I'm glad that I wasn't with Joshua, because they were told to go into the land and they were to kill all of the Canaanites. Okay, certain cities particularly, men, women, children, some of them livestock. God says, I want it all destroyed. I don't want there to be anything left of it. And this is not something that God says, I'm just tired of it. Some people call this genocide. It wasn't genocide at all. It was judgment. And I'm glad God does not call Christians today to be his instruments. We know about Islam and how, I think sometime I want to walk up to a jihadist and said, hold your sword a minute. And said, why can't Allah defend himself? Why do you have to go around killing the infidels? And can't he take care of himself? No, he can't. Allah can't. But our God can, and he will. And we don't have to defend him in that way. And I'm so glad Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. But the Canaanites were involved in all kinds of things. Let me read something to you. Even by ancient standards, the Canaanites were hideously nasty bunch. Their culture was grossly immoral, decadent to its roots. Its debauchery was dictated primarily by its fertility religion that tied eroticism of all varieties to the successful agrarian cycles of planting and harvest. All right. And so this had permeated every area of their culture and their society. And they believed the lie that in order for them to get crops, for them to be victorious, for them to have children, for them to be successful, they had to be involved in these religious practices that involved all kinds of sexual immorality. And ultimately, what God seems to condemn the most is that they would offer their children as sacrifices to the god Moloch. And so the children would pass through the fire, it says. This was so abhorrent that they would take their little children and offer them, and somehow that meant they would be safe and they would get blessings. God was just, he had it. He was full. The sin of the Amorites was full, okay? You know, I don't know if your dad ever said, I've had it up to here, then you knew, you know, if it was up to here, you get away with it. But when it was up to here, you'd clear out, okay? And God had enough. And in addition to divination, witchcraft, female and male temple sex, Canaanite idolatry encompassed a host of morally disgusting practices that mimic the sexually perverse conduct of their Canaanite fertility gods. Adultery, homosexuality, transvestitism, cross-dressing, pedastry, sex with all sorts of beasts, and incest. Note that after the Canaanite city of Sodom was destroyed, Lot's daughters immediately seduced their drunken father, imitating one of the sexual practices of the city God just annihilated. And so we don't have to go, I mean, I'm ready for my shower again. Okay, we don't have to get into the details. We don't have to have pictures, do we? We say, well, this is what concerns me, that was the conquest of Canaan was 3,500 years ago. 3,500 years ago. Now, that list, it's not very far from what we can, in fact, we could probably have parallels to everything I've listed there in our own culture today. Whether they're as developed as they were in the Canaanite culture, the seeds of them are all in our society, and some of these seeds have sprouted and are producing fruit, if you would. And so this concerns me because God is love, God is gracious, God is long-suffering, but God comes to an end. Now, the Canaanites were ignorant of God. They didn't know God. And so when we see God dealing with his children, the Israelites, who began to adapt some of those, I mean, even people like Solomon, you say, God spoke to Solomon. He appeared to him and gave him an answer to his vision. And Solomon's heart was led astray by his many wives, and he allowed some of these evil practices to come back in openly into Israel. And God judged his people, and he didn't wait all those years for Israel because, see, they had been given more light than the Canaanites. You know, if you look at the founding of our country, I mean, some of them saw this as a city on a hill, a light, and that this culture, this nation, based on biblical principles with freedom and responsibility and godliness, would become a light into this whole world. That's how some of the fathers saw the United States of America when it was founded. And I don't know if any nation in history has been involved in sending missionaries and supporting missionaries to the degree that our country has. And so, you know, we'll dwell on the good things. Okay, we've been given a lot. I tell people they don't believe this. I'm so old that I remember when we read the Bible in public school. You know, that's how old I am. And they don't do that anymore, do they? Okay. You know, I say this, and I and I mean this, I feel bad for people who are adults that are blind, okay? But I really am upset about what's happening to the children and the young people in our country. This is I know this breaks God's heart and angers God, that we are offering our children to the gods of the Canaanites. Now, Jesus loved the kids, okay? And he says, allow the little children, because the parents brought their little children to Jesus to have him bless them. And the disciples trying to run, watch out for him. They said, no, y'all leave him alone. He's busy. It's like the adults are more important. But Jesus understood that for a culture, the children are the most important ones. If we don't watch out for the kids, there is no United States of America. And that's why we're in the trouble we're in right now, is because we've allowed our children to be offered on the altar of secularism and humanism and evil, the lie. They need to be protected. Mark 9:42. I mean, this is a rough section that Jesus is talking about here, sweet Jesus. But I want you to look at this verse, because it tells something about the heart of God, doesn't it? Doesn't it reflect how Jesus felt? I mean, he wouldn't have said it if he didn't mean it. He says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him. He said this same phrase before about Judas. The man who betrayed him, it'd be better if he had not been born. He says, whoever causes one of these little ones to sin, it would be better for him if a great millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to swim with any weight at all. I mean, just your own, jump in with all your clothes and shoes and everything on, or if you've ever fallen in with a jacket and that thing gets wet. I mean, you can't, can you imagine a millstone? I mean, it's straight to the bottom, isn't it? And you're going to drown. It's death. He said, you'd be better off dead than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. There's been some there's been some talk recently about a movie called Cuties on Netflix. My recommendation, I did this a long time ago. I had Netflix for a while, and I found out I couldn't watch hardly any programs that didn't turn into pornography. I mean, it didn't have to be about it at all, but I'd watch it, and all of a sudden there's people are naked doing stuff on TV that husbands and wives can do in their room, but it shouldn't be on TV. And so I canceled my Netflix, and it's been a couple years. I haven't missed it at all. And but Netflix is not better. And promoting Cuties, I have not watched the movie, so I don't want to act like I'm an expert on it. But I do know that it reflects a growing trend in the dance movement. All right, this is not brand new. It's been around for several years. We've started this a long time ago, objectifying children, young girls, making them sexual objects. And it's getting to the point where these little girls, you can go shock yourself. Just go online and do some online shopping for 8-year-old girls. Yeah. And some of the clothes that they want these little, they want them to look like prostitutes. And it's supposed to be cute. What are we teaching these little girls? Aren't they supposed to be protected? And these little girls that are dancing and wearing suggestive clothing and twerking their bodies and grinding and doing things that you would probably have to go to a strip club to see normally. I would imagine, I don't know. But the fact is, these are like 11-year-old girls. Is there no sense of innocence anymore in our country that we should protect these kids? I saw, there's a YouTube, it was about this dance movement and how parents, there was a national competition and these girls are in little two-piece skimpy things, little girls, 8-year-old, 9-year-old girls, and they're doing all kinds of suggestive behavior in their dancing, and the parents are cheering. That's what really bothered me as much. They're kids. They're being told what they were taught to do, but the parents who are supposed to be protecting these kids are cheering their children for that kind of behavior. God have mercy on us. You know, there's been a movement, I know at least since the 80s, there was a North America Man-Boy Love Association, okay. And they're not so much in the forefront right now, but what they started and what they're behind is moving ahead. Lowering the age where children can legally participate in sexual activities with adults. Now, we think that children need to be protected, and we have laws that are about adults, but they're not about kids, because adults are supposed to be to a point where they are able to make the choice or the decision and be held accountable for it. And we say they're age where people below this age, children, we have a different court system, we have a different standard for them because they are deemed as not responsible because they haven't matured enough. That is a good thing, isn't it? You know, even God, when he brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, and he said to those that, they went to Kadesh Barnea, and the 12 spies went into the land, they came out, and 10 of them said, just like you said, is great, but we can't do it. They can't do it. Well, God made a judgment there. Everyone who is 20 years and younger, you're going to be able to live and go into the promised land. Those of you who are 20 years older than 20, you're not going. In fact, there were only 2, and that was 2 spies who said, it is tough, but we can do it because our God is with us, Joshua and Caleb. And they were the only 2 adults over 20 years old that got to go into the promised land. So God says these younger ones are not as accountable as these other ones. These older people are accountable. They're supposed to be responsible. And God protected the younger ones, didn't he? We are here to protect the young people. You know, we've got places where drag queens, men who are perverts who dressed in Halloween outfits to look like the opposite sex, go into libraries, and parents bring their children to listen to these people read books. And they think, aren't we tolerant and good parents because we're exposing our children to this? That's evil. It's evil to do that to those children. How are they going to know right from wrong? How are they going to know how life is? We are just, it's God, I don't see how we talk about abortion and how we murder babies. But what do we do with the ones that are alive? You've got musicians, you've got so-called musicians, and I don't listen to secular music unless it's from the late 60s, early 70s, and and that not very often, but confession's good. But there, I don't know. It's not racial. It's cultural. Okay, it has nothing to do with the color of your skin. But hip hop, some of it is evil, and it shouldn't be on the airwaves. Women are not hoes. They're not, bitches. They're not objects of sexuality only. And it's not just the men who are talking about that and singing about that, but the women are doing the same thing. I took a shower at the video with Cardi B, who, how can you put that out there and make money off of degrading women in such a way? I mean, even Miley Cyrus, oh my goodness, Katy Perry. Some of it doesn't matter. It's a broad spectrum. And parents, we've got to, that's the culture. Do we just sacrifice our kids to the culture, or do we protect them from it? Or do we help them to see why this is wrong? Even something, how many of you have a smartphone? Okay. All right. Do you know that we have to make choices about our smartphone? I don't have to think anymore. You can ask me a question about anything, and I can act like I know everything. I can give you the answer, right? There's a lot of stuff on there, isn't there? Some of it's really good stuff, and some of it's really bad stuff. And social media, which, listen, let me use this as an opportunity. If you're watching everything, yes, I have a Facebook account. That's so we can stream. I do not use it. So if you ask to be my friend on Facebook and you don't hear from me, you are in the group of everybody else in the world, all right? I have not befriended anyone, so I'm not rejecting you, okay? But social media, I was reading about police in New Brunswick, Canada, warning the parents that children as young as 8 are they're image sharing nude photos with each other. 8-year-olds? Where do they learn this stuff? It's in our culture. It's everywhere. And you say, well, I can turn it off and I don't have to listen to it. But you see, our children don't discern these things. And sometimes they get caught up in it. And sometimes they're pressured. They're pressured, to belong and all. We old people remember those days. They said same-sex marriage, that would just be the end of it. It's just like opening the door to hell, okay? And there is no end to the different minority groups that will end up being involved in this. And we've already seen LGBT go all the way to Z, haven't we? All right? Everything that you could possibly imagine will be put forth as a legitimate lifestyle that needs to be legally protected. What's the difference between the United States of America and the land of Canaan? What's the difference? Only the mercy of God at this point. And we need to thank Him for that. Turn to Ephesians chapter 5. I'm glad this is only half an hour. Ephesians chapter 5. Look at this. Verse 11. Ephesians 5:11. It says, "Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them." Now, in light of this, let me tell you that this is a great application when we think about our children and our grandchildren. Are they hearing the truth? They're hearing the lie. Are they hearing the truth? And so when they hear a lie and they don't hear the other side, it has more power, doesn't it? And they have no choice unless we give them the choice. Expose them. Moses said, choose life That's what we need to be preaching to the young people. We don't need to be sending them to the government schools where sex education is going down to kindergarten, if it hadn't already been, and it is saying that everything is okay. You feel like a boy today, little girl? That's your right. It's okay. You want to be a little girl, little boy? God bless you. You're so brave to say that. You see the evil of it. It is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. And whatever makes manifest is light. We are to be sons and daughters of light. That doesn't mean we're going to go around and say, you're evil because of this, you're evil because of that. But we've got to shine the truth onto these things because people are deceived. And some of them are just caught in a deep web. Maybe we can save some. But God help us to pull the children out of this. Christian children particularly, huh? They're so close to the safety that God wanted them to have. Used to call, some people call homeschooling greenhousing, and they use it derogatory. You should greenhouse. Every child should be greenhouse. They should be protected until they're strong enough to make decisions. They know right from wrong. They know consequences. They know God who loves them. Then they can go into the world. We need to greenhouse them. We need to lead them and guide them and protect them. We must. Let's pray.